Welcome to Newcastle Family History Society podcasts. The Newcastle Family History Society, located on Awabakal land in Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia, provides support for those interested in family history. In the 1820s in New South Wales, a program initiated by a ladies' committee for the Parramatta Female Factory was introduced to reward assigned convict women for their service and good behaviour, with the goal of encouraging personal improvement and helping them become more productive members of society. Mel Woodford traces the development of the scheme and the impact it had on 4 female convicts.
During the governorship of Ralph Darling, from 1825 to 1831, a ladies' committee was established for the Parramatta Female Factory. In a letter from Governor Darling to Sir George Murray, Secretary of State for the Colonies, dated 18th of February 1829, the Governor states that the Board of the Parramatta Female Factory have much pleasure in announcing
the formation and introduction into the establishment of a ladies' committee composed of the principal ladies in the neighbourhood, actively encouraged and patronised by Mrs. Darling, the object of which is, by the adoption of an evening school, to inculcate moral instruction and excite and raise into being a better feeling for their condition and a desire to improve by becoming good servants their stations in society. The ladies also hold out encouragement to work during their leisure time, intending from the proceeds of their labour to form a fund from which to reward those who have remained long in their services with good characters. The board need hardly remark that they anticipate much good to result from the interest taken in the establishment by the Ladies' Committee.
the idea of being rewarded financially must certainly have added an incentive for many of the female convicts who were assigned. A number of announcements in the Sydney Gazette and New South Wales Advertiser of the time give us an idea of who was on the Ladies' Committee and what they did. On Tuesday the 5th of May 1829 we find an advertisement stating,
"It having been proposed by the Ladies' Committee of the Female Factory that all work sent to the establishment should be paid for when completed before delivery, the Treasurer has to request that such may be attended to by those sending articles to be made up, and also begs to state that Mrs. Gordon, the matron, is authorised to receive the amount and to give a receipt for the same. To obviate any difficulty which may arise from want of knowledge of the charges made for work, the prices are as undernamed. Signed, J. M. Dolhunty, Treasurer."
Thereunder follows a lengthy list of items and prices. This list can be found on page 1 of the Sydney Gazette of Tuesday 5th of May 1829 and gives us a wonderful insight into the clothing which was being worn by those in 1820s and 1830s Sydney. We learn that to have a frilled nightdress made up would cost 2 shillings and 6pence, but a plain one would only cost 2 shillings. Frilled pillowcases would cost 6 shillings per dozen to have made up, but the cost would only be 4 shillings per dozen for plain ones. Amongst the more unusual items mentioned was a pelerine, or decorative shoulder cape fashionable for women at the time. This would cost 1 shilling and 6pence to be made up. A tippet, or piece of clothing worn over the shoulders and mentioned in the gentleman's list, would be 1 shilling. A further notice in the Sydney Gazette of Saturday 19th of March 1831, headed Female Servants, announces that
"We are glad to observe by an advertisement in today's paper that the system of rewarding meritorious conduct in assigned female servants is still in active operation. The Ladies' Committee announced the names of no less than 32 women who have lately received premiums according to the length of their respective services. And by thus publicly recording the particulars, not only is the reward considerably enhanced, but a strong inducement to good behaviour held out to female servants in general. The heads of families are informed by the advertisement in what way they may avail themselves of this excellent arrangement, namely by transmitting to the Secretary on the first Thursday of each month a statement of the names, services, etc. of the servants whom they wish to be rewarded. We are desirous of drawing the public attention particularly to this subject, convinced that if clearly explained to the class of female domestics concerned, it would have a salutary effect upon their conduct, and thus promote the household comforts of the colony.
In the same issue of that newspaper, we are told that
the Ladies' Committee of the Female Factory, having been informed that the mode of applying for rewards given by them to female prisoners who remain more than 12 months in one's service is not sufficiently known, beg to inform the public that applications signed by the master or mistress, specifying the name of the person to be rewarded, and the length of time the applicant has been in their service, if forwarded to the Secretary, Female Factory, Parramatta, the first Thursday in every month, will be immediately attended to. The committee will feel obliged if the master or mistress will mention in the application to whom and in what manner the money is to be paid, as the sums due to 2 women are now in the hands of the Treasurer, she not knowing how to send them. The receipt of the master or mistress will be required for the sum paid. Signed, E. Marsden, Secretary.
there follows a list of the names of women who had been rewarded since September 1830. The list provides not only the names of the recipients, but also the number of years of their continuous service. It also provides the name, and in most cases the location, of their mistress, as well as the amount of reward paid to them. For 4 years' service, the recipient received £2 5 shillings. For 3 years' service, the recipient received £1 15 shillings. For 2 years' service, £1 5 shillings. And for 1 year's continuous service, 15 shillings. These are not inconsequential amounts. We discover that Susan Lloyd's 15 shillings for completing 1 year with Mrs. Neal is still in the hands of the Treasurer, as is the same amount due to Mary Ann Carroll for her year's service with Mrs. Thompson. Amongst the names we find 4 women who had been commended for their services with households in the Hunter Valley. These women are Maria Fraser, who arrived on the Louisa in 1827, Margaret Grady, who arrived on the City of Edinburgh in 1828, Ellen Partridge, per Brothers, 1824, and Margaret Sheriff, per Princess Charlotte, 1827. Maria Fraser was 21 years old when she was convicted of grand larceny at the Old Bailey on the 12th of July 1827 for stealing clothing and pledging or pawning it. The clothing belonged to one Alexander Simpson, a private in the Coldstream Guards. His wife, Anne, had taken Maria into their house when she was in need of somewhere to stay. Anne soon discovered that Maria had taken items of clothing to the pawn shop, and so she reported the theft. Maria came before the court and was sentenced to 7 years' transportation. From Marylebone in London, Maria was single and a housemaid. She arrived on board the convict ship Louisa on the 3rd of December 1827 in the company of 89 other female convicts and 21 children from various parts of England and Scotland. Maria was recorded as having been first assigned to Charlotte Lowe in 1827 upon her arrival in the colony. In the 1828 census, she was recorded as being at the government factory Parramatta. By 1831, Maria had been assigned to Mrs. Sophia Close, where she was nominated for the reward. Mrs. Close was the wife of E.C. Close of Illalong, near Morpeth, a settler, churchman and magistrate. Maria must have settled in well to her assignment to have been considered for the nomination by her mistress. Maria had been granted a ticket of leave in December of 1830 to remain in the district of Maitland. The following year, an application to marry William Marshall, 29 years of age and also a ticket of leave holder, was approved in May, and the couple was wed by the Reverend Wood of Maitland. Had Maria's life turned a corner for the better? Sadly, we will never know, as we discover that she passed away the following year, aged just 26 years. Margaret Grady was a 22-year-old woman from Limerick when she was convicted on the 13th of March 1828 with stealing clothes. She had had 3 prior convictions and was sentenced to 7 years transportation on board the City of Edinburgh, which arrived in Port Jackson on the 12th of November 1828. Margaret was assigned to the Reverend and Mrs. Threlkeld in Lake Macquarie. The Threlkelds had 5 young children, so it would be assumed that Margaret's abilities as a nursemaid, washerwoman and needlewoman would have been appreciated, particularly as we know that Margaret was nominated for recognition by the Ladies' Committee of the Parramatta Female Factory after having been in service with the Threlkelds continuously for 2 years. Margaret's £1 5 reward would have been very welcome, as she married Michael Dwyer per Phoenix 3 in September of 1829 by the Reverend Wilkinson of Newcastle. Margaret Sheriff, or Sheress, as she was otherwise known, arrived in Port Jackson on board the Princess Charlotte in early August 1827, along with 90 other female convicts and a number of their children. Margaret hailed from Aberdeen in Scotland and was in her late 20s when convicted of housebreaking and sentenced to 7 years transportation. The 1828 muster shows Margaret assigned to Archibald Bell as a house servant. From 1829 to 1831, we find her assigned to Mrs. Mary Ann Fennell, who was Archibald Bell's 4th daughter. Mary Ann had married Captain John Fennell in early 1825 and was widowed only 18 months later. 2,000 acres of land which had been allocated to Captain Fennell at Hunter's River were transferred into Mary Ann's name. Margaret must have been a great help to her mistress Mary Ann and her young child, as she was nominated for a reward from the Ladies' Committee for having completed 2 years' continuous service. She was awarded £1 5. In August of 1831, Mary Ann remarried, and Margaret received her ticket of leave to remain in the district of Patrick's Plains, which is now Singleton. 2 years later, in November of 1833, Margaret received her certificate of freedom. Ellen Partridge arrived in Hobart aboard the Brothers in April of 1824 at the age of 16. Her sister, Mary, 21, also a convict on board, had died just a short while before the ship arrived. Their mother, Mary the Elder, arrived in Port Jackson in January of the following year. All had been brought to trial in Lancaster. Both Marys, mother and daughter, were convicted on the 29th of March 1823 and were given the death sentence, later commuted to transportation for life. Ellen was charged with being an accessory to burglary on the 21st of July 1823, and she was given 7 years. Mary, the elder, was assigned to William Ogilvie not long after her arrival. A petition from Mr. Ogilvie requested that Mary's daughter Ellen be sent from Van Diemen's Land and also be assigned to him at Merton. Ellen was rewarded by the Ladies' Committee of the Parramatta Female Factory for having completed 3 years' service with Mrs. Ogilvie. She received £1.15. During her time at Merton, Ellen met fellow convict William Simpson, who had arrived aboard the Speak in 1826 with a life sentence for shop breaking. He was a tailor by trade and also assigned to the Ogilvies. The couple wed in late 1829. William became the licensee of the Plough Inn at Jerry's Plains, with Ellen by his side. The Maitland Mercury of 27th of December 1854 reports the death of 47-year-old Ellen after a 2-month illness, leaving behind her husband and a large family. William passed away 4 years later. They were both respected members of their community. The board of the Parramatta Female Factory had anticipated that much good would result from the interest taken in the establishment by the Ladies' Committee. For many female convicts, the encouragement and support they received did indeed make a difference to their lives and their futures.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and indeed all of them so far in this Felonious Females series, with countless stories yet to be told of the women sent to Newcastle and the Hunter Valley, their hopes, despair, survival and successes. A rich tapestry continues to unfold. Please join us again on Newcastle Family History Society podcasts.